This story right here, y'all, is a rare one. In fact, I don't know if I've ever done a segment like this in the history of this show. Ted Cruz, to my surprise, actually said something based and true. Let's pause for a minute just to soak that in. Let's pause for a minute. Because this is history being made right here. And look, I like to think I'm a fair dude. I give credit where credit's due. And that's exactly what we're going to do right here. So, Ted Cruz doubles down on condemnation of barbaric Ugandan law, criminalizing homosexuality after being compared to Bud Light. So as you guys know, the right has been going nuts over Bud Light because Bud Light did some sort of an ad with a trans person, Dylan Mulvaney, put Dylan's face on cans of Bud Light, and that led to a right-wing backlash, and they're calling for boycotts. I mean, it's a classic example of the so-called anti-social justice warriors have now become right-wing social justice warriors. If you don't do the thing that I want and I like, I'm going to boycott you. I'm going to boycott you. Isn't that what you guys just go after the left for? This goofy sort of culture war obsessed stuff? Anyway, I digress. So now, Ted Cruz says something which is the most obvious thing anybody's ever heard ever. I mean, it's just a duh position. But credit to him for saying it, because people on the right, normally they'd be quiet about this, or even some are insane enough to come out and support it. There's a new law in Uganda, which is vicious, viciously anti-gay. Ted Cruz agrees. He points that out. His own supporters turn on him and dogpile him, which, by the way, says something about the following that you've cultivated. Says quite a bit, actually. Senator Ted Cruz stood by his condemnation of a new Ugandan law imposing harsh penalties for homosexual relations on Tuesday morning, despite comparisons between himself and Bud Light made by critics on his right flank. On Memorial Day, Cruz quote tweeted a New York Times article about the law, stating that, quote, "This Uganda law is horrific and wrong. Any law criminalizing homosexuality or imposing the death penalty for, quote, aggravated homosexuality is grotesque and an abomination. All civilized nations should join together in condemning this human rights abuse. Hashtag LGBTQ," he added. The bill would impose up to 10 years in prison for anyone who engages in same-sex relations. Let me repeat that. 10 years in prison for anybody who engages in gay relations. So even if you're in the privacy and the comfort of your own home, in your own bedroom, if you get caught, you can spend a decade in prison. They say a life sentence on those who have gay sex. Jesus Christ. Life sentence on those who have gay sex. And death penalty for, quote, acts of same-sex relations with children or disabled people, those carried out under threat or while someone is unconscious, which the bill calls aggravated homosexuality. So this is the part that, like, his far-right critics are ignoring the first part of the law, and they're just focusing on this part, that, like, having sex with a child, which is pedophilia, they're going to put people to death over this. And so they're saying, like, Ted Cruz is soft on pedophilia because he's against this law, but they totally ignore this portion. The bill would impose up to 10 years in prison for anyone who engages in same-sex relations, a life sentence on those who have gay sex. So they ignore that part and don't comment on that part, probably because they know whatever they would say is, like, abysmally wrong, right? And they pivot to, Ted Cruz is just weak on, on pedophilia. But I have no doubt Ted Cruz, and by the way, anybody else, it's not like they don't want hefty prison sentences and maybe even life in prison for pedophiles, right? I mean, our own Supreme Court said the only crime you are legally and constitutionally allowed to give the death penalty for is murder. So we don't have the death penalty for any other crime. There's only the death penalty for murder in this country, okay? So you can't do the death penalty for pedophilia, but I'm sure Ted Cruz wants life in prison or a very, very long prison sentence for pedophilia. They have to strawman him to try to attack him, to act like, Ted Cruz is like pro-pedophilia being legalized. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I never thought in a million years I'd be out here defending Ted Cruz. But that's exactly what I'm doing, because he's right. One of the Cruz's harshest critics was Jenna Ellis, the disgraced attorney who assisted former President Donald Trump in his attempt to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. To be fair, Ted Cruz said, "I would argue that case for you at the Supreme Court if it got to the Supreme Court." He told Trump that. So he's just as guilty on this stupid rigged election stuff. Quote, "You can condemn a law that imposes the death penalty for homosexuality without being pro-LGBTQ. Like Bud Light, you should just have said nothing. So don't criticize the law, which wants to give people life in prison for being gay and having gay sex. That's what she's saying. Are you kidding me? What a loathsome son of a bitch. She doesn't care about liberty. She doesn't care about freedom. She doesn't care about consenting adults having rights. Jesus. And by the way, the point she makes here is actually true, right? I don't think Ted Cruz would consider himself pro-LGBTQ, nor do I think he is pro-LGBTQ. He just doesn't want to go literally the Nazi genocidal route, right? That's what we're looking at here. Because I don't think Ted Cruz is pro-gay marriage. He's not pro. He doesn't want to give them equal rights. He just doesn't want them to be murdered because of who they are. So when she says you can condemn a law that imposes the death penalty for homosexuality without being pro-LGBTQ, that's actually true. And that's the category that Ted Cruz falls into. You know, he's not for gay marriage. He's probably not for anti-discrimination protections. He just doesn't think that consenting adults in the privacy of their own bedroom should get life in prison because they had sex. Yes, there's a spectrum. Yes, there's a scale. Yes, there's various issues involving gay rights. And he checks the most basic boxes of like, let's not genocide them, but he's not in favor of gay rights or anything. So what you're saying is true. But this reflects more poorly on you than it does on him. Because you're running cover and obfuscating for the law. You said, hey, either support it or don't say anything, right? That's the implication here. She says, should have said nothing. So that's either tacit support for it, or in her case, she might outright support it. I don't know. For the commenters, I stand with Uganda. There it is. Like I said, outright support. She outright supports it. For the commenters, I stand with Uganda on this because the definition of aggravated homosexuality subject to death penalty is raping children. Why would Cruz be against this anyway? And what does this have to do with LGBTQ? Absolutely stupid comment. Well, moron, as I said, it is unconstitutional to put anybody to death for anything other than murder in this country. That's point number one. Point number two, I'm sure he wants life in prison or a very long time in prison for pedophilia. No doubt about that. Point number three is the other part of this law is locking up gay people simply for being gay, giving people life in prison for consensual adult gay sex. What a lying smear merchant prick she is. Later, she described herself as objecting to a pro-LGBTQ tweet from Ted Cruz that said the Ugandan penalty for child rape is too harsh. Cruz responded by characterizing, I think that's supposed to say, Ellis's position as ridiculous. Quote, Jenna, not sure why you're defending this barbaric Ugandan law, he replied. It imposes life imprisonment for consenting adults who engage in gay sex. That's ridiculous. You or I may not agree with their choices, but consenting adults should not go to jail for what they do in their own bedrooms. Hear, hear, Ted Cruz. Hear, hear. But look, this is one of those instances of like, they don't know the monster they created, these people on the right. They've created a monster on the far right, which goes further than they do, right? Ted Cruz is like, I don't want to genocide gay people. But you got people who are like, well, I was a fan of yours, now I'm not. And I kind of do want to do that. All right, here we go. Or at the very least, they want to lock them up for life. They want to lock up gay people for life. So Dylan Burns pointed this out here. And you can see it. You can go through Ted Cruz's original tweet, go through the responses. Some of them are people being like, hey, props where it's due. A lot of them are people like this. Look at this. Woke Ted Cruz. Globalist Canadian masquerading as a fake cowboy says, what? I bet you utilize the woke terms of minor attracted people and younger attracted persons behind closed doors. In other words, they're smearing him and saying he's pro-pedophilia because he doesn't want gay people to be locked up for life, simply for being gay or engaging in a gay sex act. Ted Cruz is pro-butt sex. That's disgusting and anti-life. Why do you hate life, Ted? Gay is not okay. So for those who think there hasn't been a regression on these issues, think again. Think again. The majority of the American people, let me be clear, the majority of the American people are in favor of gay marriage and gay rights. It's like 70% now. But there's a solid 10, 20% block that are absolutely vicious and committed to being anti-gay in the sense that they would lock them all up. And that's the kinder ones. There are some who just want to genocide them. Again, what Ted Cruz is saying here is like very basic. He's not pro-LGBTQ. He's not pro-gay marriage. He's not for anti-discrimination protections. But he's just like, hey, maybe don't lock up gay people simply for being gay and having gay sex. And they're like, oh, lock them up. And these are the same people who pretend they love freedom and love liberty. The same people, man. They mean freedom to live the way they want you to live with their traditionalist, fundamentalist, dumbass values. Anyway, you can see here, a monster has been created. And now they're struggling to control that monster. It's very clear. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.